Mr. Chairman, we should be good to go.
All right, very good. Call the Board of Supervisors meeting to order. If everyone would please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we have adoption of the agenda. Does anyone have any additions, deletions, or changes to it? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve. So moved. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Next is special presentations and appearances. Our business spotlight this evening is Jen Supervisors, owner of Paint Orange. Yeah. Good to see you
It's
again.
good to see you again.
Took
Yeah,
us
I saw a couple of you
at 8 o'clock this morning.
Thank you guys for letting me come and be here tonight and share my business with you. I am Jess Supervisors and I am the owner of Painted Orange. I'm in the process right now of renovating a retail space in the old Halley's Hilltop building, right here in town. I'm really excited to be bringing this building back to life. It's been sitting doing nothing since I think the late 80s. And so, as you can imagine, I'm having a lot of fun inside trying to put it back to being usable. It's a really exciting opportunity for me because the museum actually owns the building still. And so once we get it redone, they will actually still be able to hold special events and community and educational activities in the space as well. I'm partnering with them on a couple of events. We have some coming up in September and November. We're doing free kids activities on Saturdays. So September 25th, we're doing a make your own berry ink, which feels like a good idea now. It may not be a great idea when I've got a bunch of kids covered in berry juice. And then in November, we are bringing back our pine cone turkeys that we did a few years ago. So some fun historically based crafts to get kids in and get them excited about the history stuff that we have going on. Painted Orange started as a take-home pottery business in my basement in January. It's paint your own ceramics is how it started. I'm opening the studio space with the goal of paint whatever you would like. I've been telling people that we're gonna put paint on anything that you can put paint on and maybe some things that you shouldn't put paint on, and we'll see how it goes as we go along through the process. We have started a book club, which is really exciting. Everybody reads the book and then they get together and make a piece of art that the book inspired for them. And it's been a really fun, neat take on book clubs, and we've had several people sign up for that. Planning to open in September, soft opening, and then the grand opening will be October the 2nd. You're all invited, obviously, come by and paint something. Since I started, I have been able to partner with the Art Center and Love Orange. I provided the horses that were at the Community Clay Day. If you saw any of those in the paper, the giant 2-foot-tall horses, I was able to provide those. And then in September for the street festival, I'm working with the chamber on coordinating their kids' craft activities that they have going on there. And then in November, I will also be at the locally made market at the Montpelier Hunt Races. So that's what I'm doing and that's what I've got going on. And I think now I'm supposed to ask if you guys have any questions about that.
I've actually got a comment to add to what you said.
Yeah.
One, you were selected to the locally made market.
Yep.
But, and that is sponsored by the Orange County Office of Economic Development and Tourism. And then also, you were selected for the fall cohort of the Community Investment Collaboratives Entrepreneur Workshop.
I was, and I am going to leave here hopefully in the next 5 minutes so that I can make it to my first night on time, because it starts at 6 o'clock in Charlottesville.
And how long is that course?
It runs until November 30th, so
16
16 weeks,
Yes.
18 weeks, something like that. I'm trying not to think about how many nights I'm gonna have to be there,
I
so.
think deserve a lot of recognition for those things, just starting out with this.
So, and I did bring information for you guys, so I can hand this to you here. But thank you guys for letting me be here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, take care. Yeah, good luck. Great. Next is consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. New business. Proposed resolution to appoint a local fire marshal. Nathan Moore. All right, Ms. Chief. There you go, sir.
Evening, gentlemen. Just here to propose the resolution to appoint a local fire marshal. As many know, back in 2020, Assistant Chief Johnson retired from the department. He held that position prior, kind of left a hole for us. Assistant Chief Throckmorton, who was standing next to me, went and got the 1033 fire investigator certification and recently graduated from the Virginia Fire Law Enforcement Basic Academy. Having those certifications kind of meet the requirement for the fire marshal. Having a fire marshal that can actually investigate cause and origin of fires and has the law enforcement powers to continue that investigation to the end is extremely important. We did have Chief Johnson got a conviction as of 3 weeks ago on his last case that he did in 2024 arson. So we are proposing and asking that the board adopts the resolution that allows Chief Throckmorton to obtain that role.
Discussion?
This is just with regard to investigation, correct?
Correct, sir.
I'm trying to find the language, there was a subsequent authority that you're anticipating at some later date that has to do with the law enforcement aspect of it. For some reason, I can't find the language all of a sudden, but
Yes,
do you know what I'm trying to refer to?
I do, sir. So part of the fire marshal resolution, this was also part of Chief Johnson's role when he took over that. As the fire marshal for the county, they do have the basic law enforcement powers that are equal to any powers that deputy has as it pertains to arson and fire investigations.
That's it.
The one thing that Chief Johnson did not have is he was not armed, so he was not able to protect himself while doing these arson investigations. We feel that it's very important that while Chief Throckmorton is investigating fires, that he does have the same protection afforded to police officers as he does, as he will be a sworn law enforcement officer. That would only mean that he would have that when investigating fires, not any other time.
Yeah, I found the language, it was in the resolution, not the list. Yeah, I think that's a reasonable distinction.
And we're currently working on the use of force policy, which is pretty much taken from the OCSO use of force policy. So almost exactly similar to the Orange County Sheriff's Office use of force policy that actually defines, elevated steps of use of force.
Does that involve some additional training, or what is the?
No, sir. So part of his training and what he graduated 2 months ago from was a 400-hour basic law enforcement school, which actually provides him all of the same training that a basic deputy gets for law enforcement. So he is qualified with his firearm. He got his butt beat as he ran around in circles. Weapons retention and everything like that. Like I said, Chief Johnson had the similar powers, but he did not have his firearm. Part of this is anybody that has the fire marshal designation is required to maintain certification of firearms bi-yearly.
Twice a year.
So twice a year, he will have to go to the range, which we work out with OCSO, so they'll go to the OCSO range, qualify with his weapon.
Is there, as far as the training that we went through, would there be a benefit to, if we did this, to riding along with the sheriff's office to gain some, I guess, institutional knowledge, for lack of a better term?
So some of the things we've thought about is one, riding along with sheriff's office, but also riding along with our partner neighboring agencies. So Spotsylvania County is a good one. They have a full fire marshal office that goes out and does fire investigations. So we've actually talked about that as being part of the ongoing training throughout.
Most people are not familiar with firemen carrying firearms. And I guess if there's certain situations that may require that it might also be best to be in the company of another deputy or something to forego any opportunity for misunderstanding.
So what, I guess kind of what we saw prior when Chief Johnson was in this role is he would always have to ask one of the sheriff's deputies to come with him as protection. The fire marshal carrying a firearm is, while it might be different in this county, outside of this county, it is actually normal practice. But if Chief Throckmorton got into an investigation where things kicked up, absolutely they would call for backup.
Maybe it's best to have backup before you go in.
Yes.
How often do
Just
we
precautionary.
have fire investigations?
So we did some numbers.
Are we talking about Lake of the Woods or the rest of the county?
I don't care, both.
So we pulled some numbers. In 2019, they had 17 cause and origin investigations. So those were actually structure fires that were working fires that required a cause and origin investigation. Out of those 17 in 2019 that were structure fires, one resulted in an arson conviction. Again, that conviction was as of 3 weeks ago. In 2018, they did 11 cause and origins with one arson investigation.
So with regard to protecting evidence and things like that, then there's training, the law enforcement training deals with that aspect of it.
Yes. They're called out more often than that. So in 2019, Chief Johnson was called out as a fire marshal on 70 different fire-related calls. But again, out of those 70 related fire calls, 17 were actually only working structure fires. 16 were outside fires that he also investigated.
I was going to say, I'm sure they get called out fairly regularly for fires that you're doing more of a public relations effort than actual marshaling work.
Absolutely. And the great thing about, having somebody who's actually trained to actually do cause and origin, I've been a firefighter for over 20 years. I am not trained to do cause and origin. I did not take that class. It's a 160-hour class. I don't want to take it right now. But it also helps kind of work your CRR program, so your community risk reduction. So if we have one person that's able to go out in the community, say, yes, this is actually the cause because I've been trained to know that this is the cause of the fire, they bring that information back and we can start forming CRR priorities so that we can start putting out educational campaigns to the county. So it's not just a law enforcement function, it is a education function. Many of these fires we're seeing lately are wind-driven fires that are uncontrolled. The last two in Lake of the Woods are kind of that. So if we have somebody that says, okay, we know what the cause and origin was, let's put some education in play so that we can keep these fires from causing the same hazards.
Any further questions, discussion? Does anyone have a motion?
So moved to put the fire marshal in place.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? And does this need to be a roll?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Mr. Crozier.
Aye.
Mr. Frame.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
And Mr. White.
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Thank you very much,
Thank
gentlemen.
you, gentlemen.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Next is business, CARES Act spending update. Sir.
Hello, good evening. So I was gonna, this is to give you an update of the CARES Act money that we received in the county. We received what I call general CARES Act money of $6.4 million. Part of this was appropriated in 2020 and the other part in fiscal year 2021. From that $6.4 million, we have spent all of it and expended all of it as of June 30th. We were required to share some of the money with the towns. We did that based on an allocation of population. So we gave between the two towns $1.1 million. $3 million of the CARES Act money was allocated to personnel related things. This included first responder pay, staff that had to quarantine, overtime that was incurred because other staff were quarantining. Like for example, I know Mort had like an entire shift out. Everyone had it, so then the other shifts had to pick up the work. It also was used to hire additional EMS staff, temporary EMS staff for that reason. Temporary custodial staff, and then it was also allowed to be used for any staff who had daycare, childcare issues, but I don't believe we had very many of those at all. So that $3 million went to personnel related. $1.5 million went to small business assistance. We did several rounds of small business grants to businesses in the area. $828,000 went to renovating the courthouse so we could have courts separated to have everyone spaced out with the 6 feet. Vaccine clinics, cleaning supplies, modifications to county buildings to give social distancing, and contributions to the area fire stations. $450,000 went to economic support, which included childcare assistance, some contributions to Germanna, Central Virginia Regional Jail, Rappahannock Juvenile Detention Center, the Free Clinic, and other nonprofits. And then the rest was spent in multiple categories that included housing assistance, PPE for our staff, computer hardware and software necessary to let our employees telework, COVID-19 testing and contact tracing, food bank contributions, et cetera. And so between all of that, we spent all of the $6.4 million. The county opted to, through you guys, opted to give $2.3 million from the general fund back to the COVID fund. And this was in response to the savings the county saw because of personnel expenses being paid by CARES Act. So that was transferred into the CARES Act COVID fund to be used on other related items without the specific deadlines that the CARES Act has. Of that money that was transferred at June 30, 1.9 million is still unexpended, but only 586 of it is still in a contingency where it's not allocated for a purpose yet. And then in addition to that CARES Act general money, we also received close to 2 million for broadband. That has all been fully expended. We received 79,000 in utility assistance. This was only as a pass-through to the town of Orange and the Rappahannock Service Authority. So that's all been expended as well. The airport received 30,000, that's been expended. The ambulance received provider relief funds of 56,000, that's been expended. Tourism, 10,000, also expended. And then the elections received 57,000. Of that, the time frame and the spending required us to send 18,000 back. But of the bulk of it, all of the CARES Act is spent, except for the 18,000 we had to return.
Very good.
And the general fund money that's still there.
Any comments, questions? I'd just like to say, I've talked to numerous other jurisdictions. And I think between the staff, the board, everyone put together, we probably made the wisest use of the CARES Act money of any of the jurisdictions I've talked to. A lot of them are still struggling to figure out, have we done the right thing? What are we gonna do with the rest of it, everything else? So I think it was very well done throughout the county. Okay, thank you very much, sir. I see no Department Director or Constitutional Officer reports. Mr. Latchney, any report? Okay. County Administrator's report. Mr. Voorhees, Regional Cigarette Tax Administration update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. As we've talked at a couple of previous meetings, there is a statewide effort to encourage jurisdictions that are seeking to levy the newly authorized cigarette tax to do so through a regional board rather than have every jurisdiction have their own tax collecting apparatus. So we reached out to our RRRC region to see if there's interest there. Not a great amount of interest there in creating a regional entity of our own. Most jurisdictions are considering joining the Northern Virginia Cigarette Tax Authority or continuing with their current arrangement as an individual. Some of the towns do that. But our region to the south and west, the Jefferson Planning District is moving forward with the regional commission, and they have offered us the opportunity to join with them. So they are moving forward, and at this point, it's appropriate to consider setting a public hearing. That would be a required step, and the board, subsequent to that hearing, would make some sort of decision as to whether you do want to go ahead and join. If we join, then we would essentially pass an ordinance setting a rate and pass a resolution joining the regional commission and then appoint a representative. I think this is the way, if we choose to levy a cigarette tax in our jurisdiction, this is the way to do it with the least amount of overhead and the least amount of bureaucracy. And so with that, I've presented the documents that would move us forward, and it would be appropriate for the board to consider whether you're ready to schedule a public hearing. With that, I'm available for any additional questions.
Questions?
I'm just a process question. There's language in your letter, actually from Allison, but to read it, it talks about the ordinance would not be, it sounds like the ordinance would not be available at the time of the public hearing, but would take input from the public hearing in order to create the ordinance. And so did I misread that, or what
Slightly.
sort of describe the schedule that as you would see it?
Yeah, the input was actually to come from the county attorneys in the region to inform the ordinance. So we do have that now. We have a draft ordinance. I'd be able to get that to the board right away and to include that in the advertisement so people could read it.
Okay, so that was what I was concerned about, is that the public hearing without a draft ordinance was.
We have that.
Yeah, I didn't want to see two public hearings.
Yeah, that's where I thought it was headed. Is it really too public? Okay, that's fine.
We'd have to pass the ordinance to find out what's in it.
That's right.
We're just
We might not like what was in there, we may.
modeling ourselves after the federal government.
Exactly. And as Mr. Voorhees said, there was, two separate meetings. There was quite a bit of discussion at the regional commission level. And it was just because of where we happen to sit geographically is why there's a split as to where the different jurisdictions are going.
Mr. Chairman, if I might also, just FYI, in order to form the commission, it will take at least 6 jurisdictions to join it. Right now, I don't know that there are 6. I know the folks that are organizing this are working on it, but unless and until we get 6 jurisdictions, we can't actually form it.
Is that a state code requirement?
It's a state code requirement.
Little question on the agreement, memorandum of understanding, whatever it is. There was a little item of specificity in it that I thought was a little odd, which was that the county administrator is automatically appointed, or the county administrator can appoint somebody. Can you give us some insight as to why that? I mean, normally the board that is gonna be up to the board. We don't normally have, our appointees prescribed by an agreement.
I would have to look into that. I'm not clear on why. that
Well,
would
I mean,
go.
somebody drew it
Yeah,
up, so who did that?
Yeah, so I do know that Albemarle and Charlottesville played primary role in the drafting, but I didn't really participate in any of those kind of conversations.
Well, it just seems odd to me, because we've got like RSA, we've got the regional jail board, we've got any number of regional commissions, and it's a board prerogative, so
Sure.
I just am always somewhat jealous of giving up that prerogative.
Right.
I don't think any of us are gonna fight you for the right to sit on the board, but who knows what's going on in 10 years from now, and there may be a reason for a county which would want to appoint someone other than the county administrator or their designee, so.
I'd be happy to.
I would push back on that and see if we can't get that
Sure.
adjusted.
Okay. So is there a desire to move forward with this to the public hearing point? So,
Assuming all the documents are gonna be available to us and the public preceding that. So moved.
with that caveat, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Passes unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Voorhees. Next is board comment. And start down with Mr. Marshall.
Currently no comments.
Mr. Wade.
No comment.
Mr. Johnson.
Why did they get to go before me?
Because we started with the less important of the calendars.
I have no comment.
Mr. Frank.
I have no comment.
No, nor do I. Other than some.
Nothing
some-
public.
That's
Nothing to say
right.
publicly.
That's exactly right.
That's amazing. Nobody out of this group of politicians had a thing to say.
Because we're all shy and retired.
Exactly. Next is informational items. I think everybody should be good with that. Next is appointments to boards, commissions, and committees. So that was a fun one. Do we have any this evening, gentlemen? I do have a question. I know there was some discussion regarding the social services board. Has there been any discussion within staff and social services? Mr. Frame?
No, we haven't had anything, still, we did, I still haven't received from Crystal the ideas that came up at that last meeting, so I can promulgate it to some other people.
All right.
That was just the idea of saying, what is it, we want this advisory board to do.
Right. Okay. Very good. Next is calendar. Let's see. Do you have anything on here this time, Allison? I'm still getting used to this.
No, sir, we don't have any items to schedule this time. Planning Commission does have a meeting coming up next week, and they have a number of public hearings that may be forwarded for y'all's consideration at your second August meeting.
Very good. Yes. Our public hearings were advertised, so. we
As
hold
part
that
of
now.
the regular meeting at a specific time, so you can continue if you'd like.
All right, well, we shall do that then. First public hearing is SUP 20-05, Redfish Solar Partners LLC. Do we have anyone presenting?
Yes, good evening, everyone.
But, hold on just a second. Do we have anybody from the county presenting for us?
Does not appear that we do at the moment. If you'll give me just a second.
Okay.
I'll track that down.
I think there is a plan, a presentation.
Yes. There is a representative from EDF. Whenever you all are ready for his presentation as well.
Yes, we'll hold off
Yes,
with
sir.
staff presentation first.
Could I have some questions for the staff?
We will go ahead and take a 5-minute recess. Go see Mother Nature and then we'll.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
never mind. We'll
Five
go ahead and-
On the other hand,
Okay. Staff presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, members of the board, Mr. Administrator.
We're gonna take a 5-minute recess.
Okay, fine.
the clock restarted by
Walker, we're gonna take a brief recess. If you can put the screen up, please. Walker, can you resume the live stream, please?
We ready, Walker?
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Gillespie.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, County Administrator, thank you for the second opportunity to introduce this case. So I'm going to walk you through SUP 2005. Just the facts of the application. It's come from the Planning Commission with a recommendation. Application SUP Special Use Permit 2005 is an application by Redfish Solar Partners for property owned by Michael and Catherine Mayo and Michael Mayo III. The applicant is Redfish Solar Partners LLC. There was a Planning Commission public hearing on this in February after one or two continuations to work on the conditions specific to the case. The Planning Commission made a recommendation which has been forwarded to you. This case is in voting District 2. The current zoning district is Agricultural A. The future land use recommended is Agricultural A2. And on this property, it's a total of 96.6 acres, but the affected acreage is roughly half, 45 of those 96.6 acres.
These are separate parcels.
Yes, sir. These are separate parcels, and it's the front half of the two parcels that join each other. We can put up any of the exhibits if you would like, including the zoning map or the future land use map, but the applicant does intend to make a presentation, and they will show some of the information presented at the work session and also just as a graphic. I was not going to put that up in my part unless you would like me to use it as reference.
Good.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
There were two members of the planning commission that voted nay. What were their concerns?
Sure. There were a couple concerns. One was transportation, and there was a transportation condition that was amended as an additional condition. And that, I believe, swayed one of the deciding votes. There were also concerns about the disposition of property that was planned and used for agricultural purposes for non-agricultural uses, even by special use permit.
There was a condition on your recommendation to the planning commission talking about gravel diaphragm trenches are to be applied at the drip line of the solar arrays running parallel to the slopes. And that was not in the final set of conditions. Is there a reason for that?
Yes, sir. That condition and the compression mats were described as the applicant as compression mats during construction were described by the applicant as unnecessary due to the low impact nature of their design.
That was your determination as well?
We agreed with it.
I think one of the additional problems that at least one planning commissioner had to do with screening.
Yes, Mr. Johnson. So there was screening in general was a point of much discussion in this case, the mitigating factors both on the ground and the condition as proposed in the SUP conditions. Included an exhibit demonstrating view sheds, and in addition to that, there was additional screening that was to be supplemented along the roadway, most visible from the public right of way, and from a distance along the perpendicular property lines as well. So it was a point of discussion, but
But the one commissioner in particular was very adamant that there should be more about screening and there should be more attention paid to screening, and that there was precedent for X amount of screening. So there was at least one of the commissioners was very, very strong on that there should be more screening. Just to answer Lee's question.
And some of this, I recall some of that screening was on the properties, not along the roadway, but going back into the property along neighboring parcels and things like that. That's I had a conversation about that with some people as well.
Any other questions or comments of Mr. Gillespie?
Are you going to comment on the conditions at this point or later, or what was your?
And I was going to go provide a little more information and then answer additional questions. In the application, this is a special use permit to construct and operate a solar energy generation facility. So that's the essence of the SUP. It's in partnership with Rappahannock Electric Co-op, REC, and Old Dominion Electric Co-op, ODEC. There's a proposed megawatt direct current, alternating current facility, which, as you all know, I think we talked about the location pretty well, so there's no need to describe its location in the county very much more. But it was sized, part of their special use permit is this is what's called distributed generation power. So it's sized to serve the residents within the area of the substation that's nearby. This will be. All right, so to the conditions, there were 20 conditions proposed that came out of the planning commission and were proposed to the board. And the applicant intends to go through these one by one. So I would just introduce that there are 20 conditions, and in those conditions, they cover the areas of transportation and access, which is both the permanent access point, but also transportation and access during the time of construction. Buffering and environmental, which relates to both screening and the buffering and the land cover, but also protection of environmental features, including the wetlands and the riparian or the street areas on the property, as well as steep slopes. Uses and setbacks, which is the actual uses on the property and where they're located. Development standards related to lighting and underground electrical lines related to the generation facility. And then lastly, a financial surety. So that's the case as it's brought forward. The recommendation from staff and commission included these conditions. Further, just want to say, this property does lend itself well to a small solar energy generation development, since it will largely be obscured from public view once the additional vegetative buffering is established. And again, that could be described in view and the view shed stimulations that were provided that you all have had. While installation of this facility will remove some arable land from agricultural production in the area that's planned for agriculture, the recommended conditions we feel provide ways of offsetting this. And we go a little further to say that the agricultural productive capacity can be restored. And again, the applicant can speak more to the design aspects as opposed to the planning aspects. But in essence, it's a project in three parts: planning and construction, which of course is the plans for the development, the construction of the development. The second part being the operation of the development. So, what does it look like and how does it function and how is it viewed any given day for the next 20 to 30 years? And at the end of that time period, what does the closure look like and the disposition of the property? So we feel that the conditions that were presented to the commission, voted on by the commission, as modified, as I said, between the public hearing period and the time when they brought this forward to you, we feel that those address these three phases of development and closure. With that, I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
One question, Mr. Chair. With respect to transportation, has VDOT provided any comments, input to this point? One of the conditions, the way it's stated, has a phrase at the end, unless VDOT objects. I'm not quite sure how to deal with that.
Right.
Have they objected, or have they had the opportunity to object, or have they not yet weighed in at all? They're waiting on a site plan?
Right.
Or all the above?
Many of the above, really. So they have had an opportunity to comment. We discussed it conceptually, which this is conceptual with them. They understand the volume, which can be classified as relatively low volume compared to a larger generating project. And they understand the network and where it should go. So times of day, types of traffic is all dependent on their traffic management plan. So one of the requirements is that they have a traffic management plan, which can be evaluated by VDOT. And that's not been done yet because there's not a site plan.
One comment about that relatively light traffic. Orange County is relatively troublous compared to some other places.
Understood.
We need to put it in true context. The volume of traffic during construction is going to be a massive volume of traffic in comparison to what it gets on a regular basis. And this is not specific to this facility, but any solar facility or large-scale construction project. Everybody tries to diminish the fact that we're gonna be running tractor trailers, dump trucks, water trucks, whatever else, up and down the road, and pickup trucks. I had the occasion today to pass 7 pickup trucks this morning going to the solar facility in Spotsy. And they were all right in a row. So I would really appreciate it if we can stay away from conjecture when it comes to traffic volumes and speak to the relativity within the county. Because this is a very large volume of traffic. And right now, Route 621, the asphalt approaching Dolan Lane is all sliding. It's not the road that it's supposed to be. So, and this will have additional impacts on it. Also considering the project in Spotsylvania is ongoing and will be ongoing during the construction of this. So that causes me some concern to hear that, because our residents do need to understand what traffic is going to be generated.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I don't mean to misstate the point, and that was the rationale behind the commission directing the traffic down the road more capable of handling that traffic.
Mr. Lasney.
Yeah, well, I actually recommend that we eliminate that condition. If the applicant was to proffer that, we go to the applicant, but I don't believe it should be a condition. We're in litigation right now, taking a position that we can't condition where somebody runs a truck.
And that was my concern, that if VDOT has already accepted that as a proffer from the applicant, that's one thing, but the way this reads, I'm not actually sure what it says.
Well, and again, as a condition, I think it needs to be struck. If the applicant wants to proffer that as the main access route they're going to use, that would be up to the applicant to proffer it, but I don't believe we can or should condition it. I don't believe we have the authority to condition which public road you're allowed to use.
And I guess, maybe this is a question to you as well, it almost sounds like items B and C, at least the page I'm looking at, are somewhat contradictory. One seems to say that there will be a specific route used. The other seems to say that we'll figure that out at site plan approval. Are they saying?
VDOT reviews the route. I mean, maybe they do, if they did, they didn't do it in a much larger solar project to the east of us. I mean, VDOT was very passive in that, so I don't know that VDOT's doing anything, to be honest with you.
All right. Isn't that an issue that we objected to in another situation?
Well, precisely, and that's the whole reason to strike that. Okay.
Of course, and for the record, not our VDOT, the Fredericksburg office of VDOT, that seemed to not know what they were doing.
Okay.
Well, we can further discuss this. I just wanted, my real question was, do we have input from VDOT on this matter? It sounds like there have been discussions, but there's no formal position taken by them at this point.
Correct.
Is that
That is correct, and they have not seen a haul route map. It's not been produced because they don't have a traffic management plan at this point.
Yeah, okay.
Well, and there's one other major concern here. Transportation. Catharpin Road was just brought up to the rural rustic level a year and a half ago, roughly. The rural rustic is a gravel road with tar and chip on top of it. We need to be very cognizant of what this traffic's going to do to that road, because in a heartbeat. So that is something that we're definitely going to have to be cognizant of.
Mr. Chair, if I may, there is a fine point in D, which I think, generally the concept is that the applicant will repair damage to the roads. But of course, as you're describing, once the damage is done, if the project is still underway and ongoing, when would the road be noted as damaged and repaired? So that, I think that's a very fine point on that.
All right. You have presentation, sir.
Also, nothing further.
Any other questions at this time? Staff?
I'm looking at the bonding, and it talks about certain costs. Who determines what those costs are supposed to be?
A third-party engineer will determine those costs.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would apply to the every 3 years as well?
It's every 5 years.
You say every 3-year intervals, they need to be updated. So they would need an independent engineer to look at that.
Oh. Apologies, yes, every 3 years. Yes, it's the same, in other words, over the course of 30 years, there may be 10 different firms that provide
That's
third-party
fine,
estimates.
but
yes.
still, you'd have, an independent engineer looks at that and says this is what it costs at this date.
Correct.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gillespie. I may call you later. All right, the applicant would like to come up.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Jeff Matron with EDF Renewables. I am joined here, I believe many of you know the Mayos.
You can.
Miles Burnstead, our Vice President of Strategic Development, Mr. James Wright with the Old Dominion Electric Cooperative, and Chris Wu with ECT, and I believe we have Chris's colleague calling in. She just got maternity leave, Tess McMorris, and another of her colleagues, Yannick Tam.
Yes, left and right ear.
Okay. Okay, so Redfish Solar Partners LLC, which is a wholly owned entity of EDF Renewables Distributed Solution, is the applicant of the project on behalf of the property owners, Mr. and Mrs. Michael Mayo Jr. and their son, Mr. Michael Mayo III. The proposed location is 2 parcels of land on the north side of Catharkin Road in Locust Grove, Virginia. The project area is currently an open agricultural field. The anticipated project footprint will be less than 35 acres at this point. The capacity of the proposed project is 4.9 megawatts alternating current, which is a much smaller project as compared to others in the state. This is because it's sized to meet the electricity needs of Rappahannock Electric's customers located nearby the project. This type of project is referred to as distributed generation because it's connecting to the distribution grid as opposed to an electrical transmission system. The point of interconnection will be at Rappahannock's existing electric line running along Mayo Lane, ultimately ending up at the existing Pate substation, which serves the local load of the surrounding area. As I mentioned, I'm with EDF Renewables, one of the largest owners and operators of renewable energy in the country. We have 35 years of experience in the U.S. developing wind, solar, and energy storage projects. We have developed over 16,000 megawatts of renewable energy projects and are currently operating 11,000 megawatts. EDF is developing Redfish Solar in partnership with the Old Dominion Electric Cooperative to provide power to the Rappahannock Electric Cooperative. This partnership was announced in 2019, whereby the parties agreed to develop and build a 30 megawatt alternating current portfolio of distributed solar projects across ODEC's service territories of Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware. Rappahannock's the not-for-profit electric cooperative serving Orange County and the surrounding area. The project will be its first cooperative dedicated utility-scale solar project located in Rappahannock service territory and will provide 100% of its power directly to homes and businesses in Orange County and the surrounding area. As I mentioned, we have James Wright with Old Dominion to answer any questions that you may have about the partnership. This slide depicts distributed solar and highlights the difference from it and typical transmission level generation. As you can see here, a typical transmission level generating facility pumps the power up to a large transmission system, which then pumps it to the substation. These distributed solar projects, they sit within inside of the substation and provide power to a local community. Redfish Solar has been through the process and received approval from the Orange County, Virginia Planning Commission. Coming out of the Planning Commission process, the project has agreed to the following recommendations by the planning staff. There should be one primary access point on Catharpin Road. This is the item that you all were just speaking of regarding the traffic going down East Plank Road. In that condition, we're going to have to go through VDOT approval. We are open to working with you to use whatever route you all see is the best fit for you all. Ultimately, though, that we need to get approved by VDOT, so we kind of left that vague, anticipating that. The site plan submittal shall include a plan showing the anticipated haul routes for larger delivery trucks for VDOT review. Any damage to the public roadways attributed to construction traffic shall be the responsibility of the project owner to repair. Any proposed roads associated with the facility or internal to the property shall be constructed in accordance with the Culpeper Soil and Water Conservation District Dirt and Gravel Road Best Management Practice Guide to the extent practicable. The project can accommodate 100-foot setbacks from any wetland, a perennial waterway, and 50-foot setbacks from any intermittent waterway. A buffer, which is a minimum of 35 feet in width and consists of staggered trees and shrubs, which are native species or similar, will be maintained along Catharpin Road. Grading associated with construction of the facility shall retain the natural topographical contours to the maximum extent practicable, except for grading and smooth excessive existing grades to control or prevent erosion. Existing mature forest land shall be cleared only as necessary for the installation and operation of the facility, and a 35-foot setback from the tree line shall be observed. Clearing not associated with the facility is prohibited. Woody vegetation on slopes greater than 5% shall be preserved downhill from the solar arrays. Solar panel arrays shall be arranged and constructed to encourage vegetation growth between and underneath the arrays and to minimize the concentration of runoff. Topsoil that's removed shall be stockpiled on site for the use and restoration of the site at the time of the decommissioning. If at any point future installation of battery energy storage systems is desired, an application must be made for an amendment to the special use permit. Construction of the facility shall not preclude any existing uses of the property, including agricultural, from continuing. However, the facility, once constructed, shall be considered the principal use of each parcel of the subject property. There should be no commercial signage associated with the facility visible from Catharpin Road or from the air. To determine minimum setback and yard distances from the internal property lines, individual solar panel arrays shall be considered main structures for the agricultural zoning district regulations or of the zoning ordinance. All exterior lighting associated with the facility shall be dark sky compliant. To the maximum extent practicable, all electric lines shall be installed underground. The project shall supply the county with a performance bond to cover costs associated with the decommissioning of the facility and restoring the site to its pre-development condition. Here you see a conceptual site plan showing an example of how this facility may be oriented throughout the property. The blue rectangles represent the rows of connected solar panels for what we call the array. On-site wetland areas are shown with 100-foot buffers, and no impact to the natural resources are anticipated. The maximum height of the solar equipment will be 15 feet. There's a proposed gravel access drive off of Catharpin Road. Again, no substation will be constructed. The project will tie into the electrical distribution system via existing lines. Fencing is shown in the green directly around the arrays, and we're proposing the use of fixed non-agricultural fencing to assist in keeping with the character of the surrounding community. Ancillary equipment shown in the middle of the project at the northern end of the gravel access, which represents the extent of the footprint of concrete foundations and or impervious surfaces. will mitigate potential visual impacts of the project by using low-profile solar panels, limiting the maximum equipment height to 15 feet, and incorporating setbacks from the north, south, east, and west lines. Shown in pink, the project is proposing a 35-foot buffer with a vegetative screening along Catharkin Road. This buffer will extend beyond the subject project parcel to the neighboring parcel immediately to the west, also controlled by the Mayos. In red, along the western edge of the project parcel, the project is proposing a 35-foot buffer and will allow the area to revegetate around the existing tree line. The blue buffer you see, also 35 feet, along the northwestern project parcel will allow the area to revegetate around the existing tree line. In addition, to help kickstart the revegetation, we'll install supplemental plantings 2 to 3 feet high at the time of planting. And also our consultant ECTs prepared photo simulations and line of sight diagrams based on our proposed buffering plan. This slide and the next view will address the visual impact of the project. What you see in this photo simulation is what a car at Mayo Lane would see traveling eastbound along Catharkin Road. These plantings and simulations represent a general depiction of a vegetative buffer from the vegetative buffer plan sheet and the SUP plans that we've submitted to planning staff. ECT graphically selected images like eastern red cedar and viburnum prunifolding for these graphics. The eastern red cedar is drawn roughly 25 to 30 feet, and the viburnum prunifolium is approximately 12 to 15 feet. These sizes would be at maturity and depend on what size they are planted to determine how long until they reach maturity age. Here you see a simulation of what a car at Mayo Lane would see traveling westbound along Catharkin Road. ECT has also prepared line of sight graphics. From these 3 different locations along Catharkin Road, these images consider existing elevations, geographic contours, and existing and proposed vegetation to determine what can be seen from a particular location in the landscape. This is a line of sight from Kathleen Court, directly across the street from the project. If one were sitting in a car at the western edge of the project heading eastbound at Catharkin Road, this is what they would see. And finally, if one were sitting on the eastern edge of the project heading westbound on Catharkin Road, this is what they would see. Here's a slide showing typical solar equipment. What you see here is racking systems mounted on support posts, panels installed on those racking systems, an inverter / transformer skid, interconnection equipment, which is a typical utility equipment you see all over, and a weather station. Last year, the project began siting, interconnection studies, site diligence, and we initiated the permitting process. This year, we would begin finalizing our engineering, procuring our equipment, and ultimately constructing the site. For a project of this size, we would anticipate a 5-month construction period. And to speak to construction, what we would anticipate at this point, and we'll know closer when we get through the site plan process, exactly the equipment, when we order the equipment and vendors, we would anticipate roughly 70 to 80 trucks approximately for the entire project. And that's over a 5-month period. And that would consist of gravel roads, which would probably take for the gravel access drive, we would need about 30 trucks to get the materials in, roughly about 15 to 16 trucks for the panels, and about the same for the rest of the equipment. And in addition to that, we would also need the electrical contractors would need to get their equipment there too, which would come with back of trucks.
And keep in mind about the daily traffic for all the crews that work.
We would anticipate at this point, and this, keep in mind, it's front end heavy, so we would be anticipating much of that traffic would be in the first few weeks getting out to the site. We would first have
What would your daily employee traffic be getting in and out of the site? I know that your installation employees are not going to be riding the solar panel trucks in and out.
We would imagine about, for the employees, probably about 4 or 5 for the construction crews. They would be staying at hotels and local businesses, even local businesses. That's in addition to the trucks for the materials. And finally, by the end of 2022, the facility could be in commercial operation. And that essentially concludes my presentation. Again, we're here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you again for hearing us.
With your capital cost, what is the cost of producing kilowatt hours in terms of what your rate structure would be for this electricity produced? And how does that compare to what REC's existing rates are?
Well, this, and James is here, he can speak to it more, but overall, this project will reduce, per connection with Rappahannock Electric, this project would be reducing the electric bill for each member.
If we could get James to speak, if he's more versed on that.
I'm James Wright, I'm with ODEC. ODEC does the generation business for Rappahannock. So we evaluated this partnership with EDF in terms of comparing the total costs. So they fix a price to us long-term. We compare that to the cost of what we would pay for the same power if we didn't have their contracts, if we had to replace it with power from somewhere else. Overall, we locked in a price with EDF, contingent on them completing the project and producing the power, where we buy that power for 20% less than what we would expect to pay without the project.
And how does that compare to existing REC rates?
So the REC is a owner of ODEC, and so all of the co-ops that are members of ODEC basically share in our costs. So that savings is passed proportionally through all of the membership, including Rappahannock. So as a component of their total stacked rate, I don't know what their distribution component of their rate is. Basically, their rate with ODEC is that we only provide the generation component, which is the energy and the capacity required. We're also getting renewable energy credits for this, which have value to Rappahannock. So we, I don't know what proportion of the total Rappahannock bill or all-in rate it is, because we're only providing the generation piece, which I think is less than half.
How does that generation rate compare with gas turbines, other sources of electricity?
It's a little bit cheaper than our other options right now. That's why we're doing this. This was a financial decision where ODEC is evaluating where there are opportunities to do renewable energy projects that could also reduce the cost for the member. That's what this was born from, was basically a process to determine what that was.
So ratepayers can see a drop in rates when these things go into operation?
So over the life of the facility, we expect that they actually will see savings. Year by year, they may see less early and more late, but we've estimated that to be about 50 cents a Rappahannock member per year. That's at most. There's still, if there are any costs that come in high on the project, for instance, we have communications equipment, some costs that aren't nailed down. If some of those run high, then the savings is reduced a bit, but we still expect up to 50 cents a year per Rappahannock member savings.
Places like Amazon and Facebook pay premium prices for environmentally generated electricity as a part of their commitment to the environment. What I'm asking, is this something that would eventually flow in, because it's going into the grid that gets up Northern Virginia, around this whole region. And I'm just wondering if that's one of the advantages of something like this.
Well, we are receiving the renewable energy credits. So when EDF builds this project, they will own it long term. We will buy all of the products that are produced. So the energy, the capacity, what's called ancillary services, kind of niche energy projects if they exist, as well as renewable energy credits. In many cases, you have to pay extra to get renewable energy credits. And this was an opportunity, a rare case, where we believe that we've executed a contract where we're not paying extra for those credits. We are locking in a combined price that actually just on the energy and capacity that we receive is less costly, and we're getting those renewable credits as well.
I think it would be interesting to do a very careful analysis of that, but I don't have the time or the expertise to look at
It's
that.
not something that the consumer's going to notice.
Huh?
It's not something the consumer is going to notice. 50 cents a year is not something that the
All right.
consumer's going to notice.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I want to make a comment. Kind of want to go back to the comprehensive plan just a little bit. It's written here on page 108 of 227. And we understand that a vibrant economy contributes to the sustainability of our community. Right below that, it goes down here and says this project is in a unique position because it's exempt from taxes, based on the fact that it's barely getting under that 5 megawatt AC. Basically, your solar panels aren't ponying up any more in taxes than a pine tree. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong.
Okay.
These are property tax exempt. There are other projects that are larger that are 80% exempt instead of fully exempt.
Do you understand the nominal ratio of solar plants? That's basically how much DC power can be converted to AC power.
Right.
Industry standards is 1.15. Usually that's the number they use. The numbers you're using is 1.3. So given the fact that this thing is built and is proposing to generate 6.472 megawatts DC, using your numbers, you barely come in under the 4.99999.
So this
Based
is,
on industry standards, I'm seeing this project more as a 5.627 megawatt AC. So now you're above the 5 threshold.
You need to do that, what you're talking about is the inverter loading ratio, and you need to do that to get the most effective site that you can. So the DC current is always going to be higher than.
But industry standard is 1.15. You're using a 1.3 to get under that threshold.
No,
And
no,
before the
I can take
taxes.
that one. Supervisor Miles Burns said, Vice President EDF. So the industry standard you're referring to is nationwide. The hotter and drier you are, the lower the ratio. So a 1.15 would be typical of a project in Texas or Arizona.
The range is 1.1 to 1.2.
Yeah, I can tell you, I've built projects for 12 years and I haven't done anything under 1.2 in the last 10. So that number's out there, but it's all math. So you're trying to match up a bell curve with a flat line and you want to clip as little as possible. It actually has nothing to do with trying to avoid taxes. I can tell you.
I think it has everything to do with avoiding taxes. We're not sitting on the board of REC, we're sitting on the board for Orange County.
No, I
Squeezing this thing in under the 5.
Yeah, so we're actually getting in.
And I actually think it's actually greater than 5.
So it's not, there's a nameplate that the equipment physically limits the output to 4.99 megawatts AC.
Would you not be willing to raise that above 5?
No, we can't raise it
To the
above
big boy
5.
tax?
Yeah, it's not about taxes, honestly. It's about the state permitting process. So DG projects under 5 megawatts go through a different permitting process that actually subtracts a year to build the project. That's the main rationale for being under 5. Also, we are matching it with the load curve. So as you mentioned, does the power go out onto the PJM transmission system? It actually doesn't. We're not allowed to push the power out for this project. We have controls in place that if we start generating more than the local grid can take, we actually have to curtail our production. So our project is very much unlike the larger projects.
And looking at that same concept, in other words, if there are major power interruptions from outside the REC grid, this thing isn't going to handle all of REC.
So if there's a major power production that's a safety issue outside of the REC grid, we will actually have to shut down because the transmission system cannot feel our power. It's just like if you were to hook up a different water source to your shower head and you started pushing power back. If there's a problem with the municipal larger water system, that's an issue. So that's one of the reasons we're not allowed to flow back. It's because if we start flowing back on the system and there is an issue, we can actually cause worse problems.
So you don't have a means of throttling back on the power generator?
Yeah, we can throttle back, but we're not allowed to send it out, if that makes sense. So,
It's a requirement to throttle back.
yeah, we have to throttle back.
I take it there's something at the substation that prevents you from,
Yeah, so actually what we do
because
is,
otherwise that substation is clearly connected at some point to the transmission.
yeah, we
It gets
monitor,
fed from something.
yeah, we monitor the flow at the substation. And if the flow goes low, we start to basically shut
How
down.
do you throttle back at the generation site?
So the inverters are able to basically waste the energy into,
Turns it into heat.
so.
So your inverters are rated at 1.3.
Our inverters are at 4.99 megawatts AC. And they can't produce 5, it's not allowed by code, so.
So your answer is really, the sizing was a permitting
Yeah, so there's three,
factor, not.
there's 3 things that go into the sizing. So first is how much load can the substation take, because we can't push it out. The second is the permitting standard, so we avoid what's called a permit by rule 1 in the state of Virginia for under 5 megawatts. And taxes do play a role, but that's the minimum role. And honestly, if we had the ability under the tax law to pay taxes, we want to be a good neighbor. Honestly, our deal with ODEC, quite honestly, is. No, I mean, realistically.
We need to pay more taxes than countries.
Yeah, well, realistically, I'm actually on a commission for our lobbying agency, and we are working on a tax bill to address this shortfall for counties for under 5 megawatts. So basically, the state legislator said, let's incentivize solar, DG solar, by having property tax breaks under 5 megawatts. That probably wasn't the smartest move, and so they're actually working on legislation for the next session that will correct some of that issue.
Well, let me shift gears for a minute away from the actual power generation and everything. I have a real problem with view shed. And even with your graphics, it shows we're going to see these solar panels from the VDOT road.
Yep.
Major problem. We have another project going in that was absolutely one of the things, you're not gonna be able to see it from the road. Also, in your photo examples, that's at maturity. I think at some point it was said, basically you'll plant them at 2 feet high.
That was in the rear of the site. And that was basically to jumpstart the existing vegetation that's already there.
Okay, when you say the rear of the site, the non-road side?
Correct.
Okay, what's going to go in from another country heard here? Go right ahead, sir.
Good evening, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the board. Chris Wu with ECT. As of right now, the road frontage that has yet to be determined. That was going to be determined with the site plan process. What you're seeing from the visual simulations, yes, that is at maturity. Our landscape architect has stated that you're looking at between 5 to 10 years to achieve that.
So, for all practical purposes.
Depending on depending the size of the planting.
Okay, so best case scenario, for 1/3 of the lifespan of this facility, we are not going to have the screening in place that we desire to have in place. Is that a fair statement?
It's hard to say until we figure out what the size of the planting is at.
Most
on the road frontage. But yes, you will see it at times, especially in the early stages, of course. But I will say that 35 feet, and I know there was some, definitely some, animated discussion in the planning commission about a wider landscape plantings. There is no real set standard across the state.
There's a set standard in Orange County, though. We don't want to see solar panels
Understood.
From any of our roads.
I understand that, and I will say from our experiences, and at least, in working with the Department of Historic Resources, for example, their stated intent is to protect viewshed impacts to historic resources and features and buildings, we've gone by with 15 foot. And they've agreed to that as well. And so it is, like I said, you'll see a variety of widths throughout the state, but deferring to the state agencies that, it is their expertise to determine what.
It's not their expertise to determine what is appropriate in Orange County though.
Understand.
And that's where we're at, that's where we're talking about. And something that gave me a little bit of pause along those lines are you're showing that vegetation is to remain on the south side of Catharpin Road. Well, I would certainly hope so. That's not part of the property. Part of the property.
Yes, we spoke to them as in a condition that we would need to get access rights to, an easement right to find that.
Are you talking about where the green vegetation is?
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
No,
Sorry.
I'm sorry, that, to me, that has zero impact on what you're planning to do here. Because it's not related to the property, it's on the other side of the road, and anybody that pulls out on this road is going to see the panels. That is.
There's existing vegetation there and you can't see it from that angle.
Okay, I guess I'll have to go drive down a road that I've never been on before. I'm sorry. It is very crucial to me that the view shed be preserved from the beginning, not a third of the way through the project. That is, and that's just on mine. I don't know what the other gentlemen feel, but it's very important to me that we preserve that. It's a country road. A lot of people like it, and that's one of the reasons that road was done under a rural, rustic project, is because it's rural and it's supposed to be rustic looking. And I've yet to meet a rustic looking solar panel. Even the little ones that VDOT has for schools and everything else. And it's a major concern when the plantings are going to be a third through the life of the project before they provide the screening that's necessary.
Well, I will say the shrubs, they do grow quicker. So, and those are gonna be largely what are gonna be obscuring the view from the road largely. So that, yes, it will take some time, but again, depending on what the size of the planting, it could be as little as 5 years.
Okay. And that's providing they don't die.
Correct.
Do you have an estimate of at what point those shrubs or whatever would begin to provide nearly total screening? I mean, is it, from some of the elevations that you had on your presentation, it did look like, I must say that it doesn't take a 30-foot screen. It looked like it was more in the 8 to 10 maybe, or a little less. Is that what I saw in your?
Can you go back to those slides that showed that?
Talking about the line of sight view.
Yeah, the line of sight.
Yeah, okay, so these
Yeah,
are.
you had one of them there, but.
Yeah, there you go.
So this is from Kathleen Court. And yeah, there's about a 3 to 4 foot berm on the side of the road. So keep in mind that the trees will be planted in that berm, providing additional elevation.
So that's my question then.
Correct.
Above the berm line, how much is needed such that the person in that vehicle
Correct.
would be screened?
Correct.
Have you looked at that yet?
We have not looked at that specifically in terms of like growth stages, but I mean, we can certainly.
Get into your question. I mean, if it takes something that's 25 feet high to provide the screen, that's one thing. If it's earlier at 4 or 5, then that's another type of screening potentially and another type of planting and those kind of things. How big is the problem is really the question.
Right, I mean, at planting, as we can keep it consistent with what's going on the western and northern edges at 3 to 4 feet at initial planting. And so, having it spaced out across that road frontage, given that 3-foot berm, it should provide sufficient screening, at least initial screening, and then as it obviously grows and matures, it should, well obscure the panels.
One comment you made that you were gonna stockpile your topsoil until decommission. How much yardage is stockpile?
Well, we're not planning on any at this point.
But you said you were.
No, that's a condition if we do move topsoil, but we don't plan on
You
grading.
don't plan on.
There's no grading yet. So.
It's in the event that we do.
Any other questions or comments from the board for the applicant? All right, thank you very much, John.
Thank you.
At this point, we will open public hearing. Allison, do we have?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, we do have one speaker, and I do just want to note into the record that you did receive written comments earlier from the Piedmont Environmental Council.
We've all received them and
Yes, sir.
aware of it, and they will be entered into the record of the meeting.
Yes, sir. And our speaker this evening is Bill Speeden, and he is speaking on behalf of the Farm Bureau.
Good evening, Bill. Welcome. And just real quick, 3 minutes?
3 minutes?
3 minutes. All right.
I'll see, do the best I can. You guys must have heard I'm coming, because I came in here, the door was locked, I couldn't get in. But some gal came along and helped me out on that. This is a relatively new idea that the Farm Bureau basically is taking a stand that we discussed with you before, that we like to see an ordinance in place so when people come in for these things, they will have the guidelines and framework from which to work from. But this is a relatively new idea. When cell towers first came in, there were many objections raised then. I was on the planning commission at the time, as was Lee, and all kinds of hell was raised over cell phone towers. Solar farms can be a good deal for farmers. Most deals can beat the hell out of raising crops, as I think most of you can appreciate. I just drove 6,600 miles across the country and back again for various reasons. I saw solar farms from 100 square feet to hundreds of acres per. And beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Modern site we can get used to as we have the cell towers. The traffic concern is apparently not in the purview of the Board of Supervisors, as VDOT has not expressed a concern here. They seem to okay it. VDOT has not does not recommend a condition. For nexus of the proper protection from neighbors and traffic and applicants where it's applicable. But putting anything 100% out of sight doesn't necessarily serve our society in time. In some cases, farmers can put a house on each of 2 acres. That development would cost the county much more than a solar farm, which with proper county management can pay, not cost. What does a housing development do to traffic and your view shed? Personally, I would support Mr. Mayo's solar farm, given appropriate view restrictions, and decommissioning costs are well covered, which I think the ordinance can do that. And the technology is changing daily, and in time, this is producing less costs over time as coal and other sources seem to be going out the window. This could be a substitute for that, and it is public interest in time to support new technology which is going, and hope you take that under consideration in your votes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill, and I will duly note it. You did it right in 2 minutes. Very good, sir.
I've had a little practice. Now you do the same.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, anyone else signed up?
I have no further speakers on that.
Public hearing is closed. All right. Further discussion, gentlemen, anything you'd like to ask of either staff or the applicant? Move forward.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to have some further discussion about particularly the transportation plan during construction. I think it's important that we get as much information about that as we can. that will be one of the significant impacts in the neighborhood, obviously, for whatever number of weeks or months that construction period lasts. And it's, you know, it not only deals with volumes of traffic, it's the type of traffic, the time of day, but it's also the route to get to the access point. I think that, I suppose some of that can be left to the site plan approval process. But I'd like to hear some discussion from staff and or the applicant about what their current thinking is about the routes and the timing and these kind of things. Just their general view toward mitigating the impact of that traffic on the roads, on the community, et cetera.
Yeah, again, I can speak to that. We're open to work with you on the best route you see fit. The only concern we have is ultimately VDOT will have to sign off on it. So that said, I mean, we're open to work with you. And that's why we would think that during the site plan process would be the best point to address this, but.
I'm a little confused. I mean, VDOT doesn't sign off on what.
We'll need an approval letter. They'll look at our traffic plan and so.
Okay, you realize you're dealing with, unless you're coming from the south, you're dealing with two separate VDOT districts.
So ultimately, we're willing to work with you. So I guess I don't know how to say to that, the final approval. We'll need to get final approval on our site plan for a traffic plan, so.
The origin of where this material is coming in from what direction is it coming from? Coming up 95, down 95 from the west, what?
Various components will come from the south and various components will come from the north. Certain things will be freighted into Port of Baltimore. A lot of our equipment that's already inboard is actually based in North Carolina.
So basically you'll be using 95 and bringing it west.
But what portion of North Carolina?
What portion of North Carolina? I think it's Greensboro area.
So you would probably be using 29.
Could be 29.
And then Route 20 through the county.
Yeah, I mean, we have a whole construction logistics team that works on that, but yeah, we store stuff for this region that we already have that's not being produced is in North Carolina. So.
Unlike Mr. White, I would, some input from staff would be nice.
Is it possible to get some okay from VDOT before we get to the point of making a decision?
I think
it doesn't sound like it because it sounds like their involvement is going to be based on the details of the site plan, which do not yet exist.
Well, they may not have the details, but I expect that they understand what they're planning to do for the site plan, whether it's an approved site plan or not.
I mean, there is no good route to get in here, but what do you have to offer?
Sure. So Mr. Crozier and members, one of the items that we discussed was a voluntary meeting before the site development began with the community that was posted with some signs that said, traffic construction is planned. We're going to host an open community meeting because we're seeking your feedback on the best route. Obviously, VDOT knows their network, they know the routing that works, and they know if there are temporary issues related to construction projects or congestion. But yes, VDOT will control through a traffic management plan, and if there are issues, then they'll bring the police out there and we'll deal with it at an enforcement level to make sure the traffic is handled.
Well, that's just, I want you to understand.
Sure.
We had 3 transformers come through when VDOT issued no permit for them to travel on the roads. But Virginia State Police escorted all 3 of them across the VDOT roads with no permit. So conceptually, all of this is great.
Sure.
It's the practical portion of it is where our concern is.
That's right, absolutely understood. And so the soft side of that, which is having the community feedback, we thought was a good idea to have. That could, I defer to the county attorney, but I mean, that normally some condition related to site plan approval and some pre-meeting approval is something that goes into a zoning condition, so that is something you could add. Or by understanding, we could understand.
Is there a road we don't want them to use?
The most vulnerable road is Cathartic, but they have to use Cathartic because you can't get to the water yet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bewildered because I don't really know what we're asking about.
Yeah, I don't.
I mean, they're
bringing up through Fall Lake.
pretty much limited,
Yeah, they are very limited as
in
far as.
what they can do. They've got to use.
And I think that's partly the concern is that, you know, it's possible that the transportation plan might send some traffic in, or bring in from one direction and other from another direction, just to sort of spread out the volume and the impact. Is there anything in your discussion with VDOT to date that you can share with us as to how they're viewing this project? Or they've not given you enough to go on?
It's been a general conceptual level discussion, like Mr. Mashron's talking about, with 15 loads of equipment, 15 loads of panel, plus personal vehicles coming and going, and how does that relate to a school construction project or some other type of project in terms of load or daily trips. I would suggest to you as planning staff, if you have transportation questions, it could be appropriate for you to continue this to another meeting and ask that question of VDOT.
I get the impression VDOT doesn't particularly care.
I don't think that that's necessarily, I know that the Louisa residency does.
Well, but in terms of, we've got to come in from different directions with different pieces of equipment and identifying that. And if there are any opportunities to readjust that, obviously they all need to come down Carpathian Road.
Yes, County Attorney, question. Could there be either a condition or a proffer that specifically required the Louisa residency approve the transportation management plan?
Well, as we've discovered in somebody else's solar case, where Fredericksburg approved it even though it was coming through Orange, I think Louisa, I think the way that the various residencies are constructed, Louisa can be the decider of all of that, and so we could certainly
I mean, that's a step, I think, in the right direction to address our concerns.
Well, and if we want to follow through with the planning commission's recommendation that construction traffic shall utilize East Orange Plank Road through Spotsylvania, I don't think we can have that as a condition, but if the applicants wanted to proffer that that's what they're gonna seek to do, they could certainly proffer that.
I think I would prefer a proffer that, or condition that relies on the expertise in the Louisa residency.
We could do that. You could strike the transportation condition mandating that it go on East Orange Plank Road and substitute a condition that all VDOT approval will need to be coordinated with the Louisa office.
Is that?
Yeah, I don't know how, at the end of the day, I don't know how much power we have to tell VDOT which office is going to. They may decide to, I don't think that they will, because I'm not sure this rises to that level, but they certainly could pull it up above the Louisa residency. The residency level, Richmond could decide. But, my assumption is that as a general rule, it's whatever county the project in, it's that residency that would handle it. My assumption.
Right, so that's why I think the condition would be okay, because the condition matches the way it's done.
So I guess, is it appropriate to ask the applicant if that's a condition that they're interested in, willing to?
Yes, we are. I believe we want to do that, yes, sir.
Is that language you could fix on the fly, so to speak, or is it?
Give me a second.
I mean, I think that,
That addresses I think the biggest concern.
because it sounds like we cannot predict the flow of the traffic even north versus south at this point, nor should we have to. that along with the condition with respect to Catharpin itself. As Mike knows, we worked pretty hard to get that road straightened out a little bit and paved, and we certainly do not want to see that go backwards. So I think that whether that condition needs a time frame, I mean, it seems to me that periodically that road needs to be looked at, and if there's significant damage, it shouldn't be left 3 months or 5 months until the end of the project, that it should be dealt with on some type of recurring basis, just to keep it, minimally conditioned, as it was before the project started. Again, I don't have the language for that, but just in case. I mean, I think a lot depends on the time of year you're doing it. If you're doing it tomorrow on a 98-degree day with bright sunshine, a bicycle will impact the road, as Mike will tell you. Otherwise, it's less so. I just think that condition needed some.
Well, I might add, on the transportation first, with construction, the second bullet point, we need to strike about through Spotsylvania.
Right.
I modified the third bullet point to say the site plan submittal shall include a plan showing the anticipated haul routes for larger delivery trucks for VDOT review, and all said review will be conducted through the Louisa residency. And I would also suggest on the fourth bullet point.
How many can we say approved by? Again, it may get bumped up to some other level, but at least at that level, I think we want Alan and his engineers and people that are familiar with our roads to be at least in the approval chain.
All right, so I just changed it. All said approvals will be sought through the Louisa residency. And then the trickier one is the fourth bullet point. Any damage to the public roadways attributed to the construction traffic shall be the responsibility of the project owner to repair. I don't know if we want to put some sort of bonding requirement in there. I think VDOT has a bonding requirement, but I don't know that we could do some sort of a bonding requirement as determined by a third party, again, same as the decommissioning.
Right, I would go a little further and say also it shall be the responsibility to repair, but also to identify for repair. Because at that point, if they furnish us the repair list, then we know the damage that's been done. Otherwise, they're just responsible.
How about maintain during construction and repair?
Well,
VDOT may want to do.
I was gonna say, VDOT may want to do the physical work of it, but be responsible for the maintenance and repair, because VDOT has been doing the maintenance and repair, the damage caused by the other county's traffic, with that wonderful large bond that they got for us.
Also, I'd like for the applicant to provide the duration of the project again. They're talking about roughly 1 year, but I'd like for them to, state that for the record. I think it's a good piece of information. What's the duration of the construction project?
Yeah, the duration will be approximately 5 to 6 months for a project of this size. Construction period.
Do you have a reaction to the issue of the road, specifically Catharpin, in terms of maintaining it? You have any comment about maintaining Catharpin either through bond or VDOT's assessment of it?
Yeah, we don't have the issue with that. Traditionally, what a Department of Transportation reviews on these projects, a couple of things. It's like approach angle to make sure that the trucks can make the turn. Do you need flaggers when there's deliveries, things like that? They often, although we see this less in Virginia, look at the condition of the road and temperature. So a lot of our projects up in New England, we can only bring equipment at certain times of the year, basically not after the monsoon season and snow melt, because it does damage the roads. They're also going to look at things on our haul road for like bridge weight, things like that. Make sure culverts, things like that, just to make sure that the route doesn't present some undue hazard that's going to definitely damage the road. Generally speaking, though, you're right. VDOT wants the roads to be used, right? And so they're going to kind of approach it that way, in my experience. But they are going to look for those specific issues where, a semi truck wasn't ever thought about coming down this road and now it has to. How do you protect that? And it's pretty common for a Department of Transportation to put some sort of road restoration bond in place. We do that regularly.
Because, yeah, it's going to be a challenge at Dolan Lane and Catharpin Road. And
that's a terrible angle to have to.
it is, and then depending, hopefully no one will be coming up from the south side on St. Just, but if they did, you're really going to have issues then, so.
Yeah, no, the one I've seen the most in Virginia is when you have a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit and you're trying to put a construction, that's been their trigger. But yeah, we can do flagging, we do that when necessary for deliveries, things like that. So.
Any other comments?
So you've deleted the route through spots?
You read what I've done, and if y'all like it, make a motion to amend the conditions. I recommend strike, under transportation access, I recommend striking bullet point number 2, so utilize East Orange Plank Road. Under bullet, the site plan submittal shall include a plan showing the anticipated haul routes for larger delivery trucks for VDOT review. All said approvals will be sought through the Louisa VDOT residency. And then any damage to the public roads attributable to the construction traffic shall be responsible to project owner to repair, and the applicant shall post a sufficient bond if requested by the county. Those are my suggested condition modifications. If the applicant's okay with that.
Yes, county or VDOT, VDOT being with.
Well, I actually put it or VDOT, and then I took it out because we're not comfortable that they know what they're doing on bonds.
Okay.
So I actually put the or VDOT and then I took it back out.
All right, I would just a minor thing on that one. Project owner to repair, I think we should say project owner to bear the expense of the repair, because VDOT or their crews are gonna wanna do the repair, they're gonna
Well,
want.
I think that's implicit,
Well, I
because
did too, but
because a private company can't work on VDOT's road, so
Right.
I think that's implicit.
Okay.
Any other
That helps.
questions or comments?
If you'd like those, you need a motion to amend the conditions. Doesn't have anything to do with approval or denial of the overall plan, but just the motion to amend the conditions.
I would move to amend the conditions.
Second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
That portion passes unanimously.
So we have a new set of conditions.
Yes. Now, with the new set of conditions, is there another motion on the floor?
I move to approve.
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
Is this for the entire project?
Yes.
Okay, at one point, I think I've driven home very hard, and I'm very sincere about it. I believe that the screening, there needs to be the best possible due diligence to have that screening reach its maturity in whatever manner necessary sooner than later.
And I also think that the site planning process, when issues of screening and some of these other details gets worked out, that planning staff as well as the applicant need to recognize what some of our concerns and sensitivities are, whether they're a box that has to be checked literally or not. We want to have a good working relationship on this project. So,
And I would also recommend that on any of this, of any magnitude, that the District 2 supervisor be brought into the discussion and consulted on it.
As frequently as possible.
Yes.
if you can find that person.
I think this project checks a lot of the boxes that we're looking for, but at the same time, I don't think we can give away the country store continuously. I think, we're in business to do business. And I'm just not satisfied where the tax base is with this. If there be one proper, that could change it for me.
I have a lot of reservations about this project that I'm not gonna go into. I'm gonna defer largely to Mr. White, who is his district, and he knows the neighborhood, he knows the situation, he knows the roads. So I'm going to defer to him on this. I want to make it clear that I'm not setting a precedent. If one of these pops up in my neighborhood, I'm not so sure I'm going to vote for it, quite frankly, because I think they're a blight on the landscape. And I'm just not, I'm not on board with this, the way this is being done. In some respects, I actually wish the state would just take it and leave us out of it, because we're in a situation where they've said, yeah, you guys can vote these up or down, but you know, they got us in such a box that it's not a very satisfactory position to be in. So again, I would just say that I'm going to look at each one of these on an individual basis. There's no, well, we approved this one, so we got to approve the next one, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that these have to be looked at individually, and you know, to the extent we can possibly mitigate the impacts, I think that's our job, to try to do that. And it will be different.
With that being said, I echo Mr. Johnson's remarks completely, agree with them, and as I think everyone knows, I am not a fan of solar, period. I don't believe it's economical or as green as what is claimed out there. I find it surprising if I vote for this. I find it surprising that I had that within me.
That's a different question you're asking.
All right, gentlemen. Any further discussion? If not, Allison, could we please have a roll call vote?
Sure. Mr. Frame,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Crozier,
Aye.
Mr. Marshall,
No.
and Mr. White.
Aye.
Passes 4-1.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. We'll have a wonderful evening. You too. One more public hearing. Mr. Gillespie, can you come give us a?
No, this one is,
No.
yes, this one's county attorney's office.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Larson. Go ahead and give us your report.
All right. Mark, does that mean you won't let me put one on Blue Hill?
Probably. By the way, I did need to announce one other thing. Mr. Speed gave me a bag with several tomatoes and potatoes in it. I just wanted to declare that on the record, so it's not an illegal gift.
Yeah, I tried my best to brag it.
It's under $20.
Thank you for your consideration, gentlemen.
Thank you, Bill.
Well thought out.
Have a good evening. All right, Mr. Larson.
Mr. Chairman, this is under Virginia code, anytime we dispose of, including lease county property, we have to hold a public hearing. And we have citizen approaches about leasing 4.287 acres on Conceptual Highway for agricultural use. And we have citizens, we've already drafted a proposed lease, which is in your packet. And Mr. Mayo, the citizens already signed the lease. So for tonight's agenda will be a public hearing, see if I had any input from the board to decide whether they approve the lease or not.
It's interesting, both their public hearings came from Mayo.
Yes, and it's a different Mayo that was in attendance, the same as one of the property owners. So we've heard from staff. I have spoken with Mr. Mayo, and like the county attorney said, he has signed it, so he has nothing else to say. Anybody have any questions for the county attorney? Open public hearing. Allison, do we have anyone signed up to speak?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Close public hearing. In that case, we need a motion on this.
Move to approve.
Okay. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. And now, Mr. Lexman, if you would,
Whereas the Board of Supervisors of Orange County desires to discuss and close meeting the following matters. Discussion, consideration, and interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of the public body concerning community development. And whereas pursuant to section 2.23711A1 of the Code of Virginia, such discussions may occur in closed meeting. Now therefore be resolved by the Board of Supervisors of Orange County that it authorizes discussion of the forestated matters in closed meeting. Need that as a motion.
So moved. Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
We're closed.
Walker, can you put the closed meeting screen up, please? Walker, can you resume the live stream, please? Ready,
You
Mr.
guys are
Chair?
good to go?
Thank you.
Allison, you were doing the reading?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, to the best of your knowledge, were the only matters discussed in the closed meeting, public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements, and that only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting. Mr. Marshall. You're just certifying closed session.
Absolutely correct.
Mr. White.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Frame.
Aye.
And Mr. Crozier.
I would entertain.
Move we adjourn.
Second. Aye. Aye. We are adjourned.